Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. I'm just getting everything started now. We're going to do a live demo in about 20 minutes. So if you're watching this at a later date, just jump ahead about 20 minutes. All right. I'm starting it off early just so I can start getting everything else set up. I have my laptop on the side so I can see what we have taking place, and then I can grab the link and share it online on Patreon and Facebook and other avenues so people can drop by and check it out. Let's see. All right. Let's grab this. I'm going to save that. Let's see. If I go to okay, anybody can participate. That should be good. Go to our details, grab the link, go back to channel content, and view in live control room. Okay, so we have that. Let me now just post on Facebook. So once again, we'll start in about 18 minutes. So we'll start at 5 o'clock. And that gives time for people to hop in the chat if they have any questions. Close this. And on Facebook, okay. It does do a really weird thumbnail. The YouTube, it just jumps like right into it whenever you click the go live button. That should be on the Andrew Broussard Watercolors Facebook page. Let's go to my normal page, and I'll post there. Okay. Okay, copy this. I don't like the way that's showing up on the Patreon. Let's delete this. Create, do it as a video. Stream. I'll do a smiley face there. All right. And I have one more place I want to share it. Edit post. Of course, it doesn't have the link there. And then I'll hop into the chat. Let's create video. Let's publish that. Let's see how that looks. Publish now. Might be easier for me to do that first. All right, I'm going to close that. Close that. Over here. It says we have 4 viewers in. I'm going to start in about 14 minutes. So I'm going to start at 5 o'clock. For those of you watching, I'm just getting everything situated. And I'm turning the sound off on my phone, which I'm using to record. See, it's little things like that. Things will go a lot smoother. Sure ones. I did some experimental live streams last week and the week before. And if I copy this and paste here, and I can pin that at the top, and then I'll say, yeah, it started at 5 p.m. I think that everything is up and running. So it took me about 8 minutes to do all that. I'm not sure if there's some sort of app that I can use to get everything rolling at once and to push and to post in all those different locations. Let's make sure we're in this live video. I am seeing it. Keep changing the angle on that. All right, so if you're in the live chat, if you're watching it now, let me know how the screen looks. I could probably get a little bit closer to the paper. The tripod that I'm using right now, I'm just filming with my cell phone, direct live onto YouTube. And the video that it shows on the cell phone is a little bit different than what it shows in on YouTube on the screen. So it's a little different than what I normally see whenever I'm filming. Long-term goals will be to, if people enjoy this and enjoy these chats and these demonstrations live and the ability to ask questions, then from there I'll upgrade those things. But the bad thing is whenever you adjust this, let's just do this. Let's lower the front of the tripod a little bit. And then I'll tilt it up a little bit more. That might make this better. And then from there, we tilt our angle. The clamps that they make for the cell phone clamp right onto the on and off buttons, and then that weird Bixby button that the Galaxy has. I think we're good. see what else I can do that I control from here. Okay. Let's see what happens right with this. Create highlight video, add stream marker, share. Oh, okay, so there's a share link at the top that lets me go to Facebook and all these other things. And Reddit, Kakao Talk, Kakao, I've never heard of that. Alright. What does this do? My channel, switch accounts. Okay, at the bottom it has reactions, different emojis, it has a donation, it has a create a poll. Okay. Let's turn that off. There we go. Alright, we'll get started in about 8 minutes. I want to see. Okay, so that's where my mute feature is on my phone. The recording device will let me mute. The reason I'm checking that out is with the fast and loose watercolor, we utilize the blow dryer, and sometimes that could obviously be quite noisy. So I could use the rest of this time, the lead up to it, to blab about today's art that I worked on earlier. I was playing with some monotype. I was taking the Aqua Intaglio ink. I was spreading it out over the plastic surface, painting back and forth with it, saturating my paper with water, and then pressing it down and transferring the single printed image onto the paper. And I did a few of those. Those videos will be uploaded to the Patreon, and I also did some time lapses and some super shorts of those. Start saturating our paper with water. I use the large hake brush, and I just go to town. You'll see that different painters will do different levels of water with their wet and wet. Thinking today we'll do a triad of raw sienna, raw umber, and burnt umber. So I'll put out some fresh paint for that. The little trick is the crab claw cracker, or the nut cracker. You could also just run some water over your tube. That'll help out. So I'm thinking burnt umber. I do like how the screen is showing the palette, the paper, and the brushes on the side. That's looking pretty good. Put out the raw umber. Both of these are dried kind of tight. It's been a favorite two-colored palette of mine lately, the raw umber and burnt umber. I'm thinking I'll add some raw sienna in. This tube is nearing its end. See what else we can get out of it. You could also use a palette knife to pull extra paint out, or cut the tube carefully since it's metal and fold it open, and use the folded open tube as a pan itself. Let's see, we'll get started in about 4 minutes. This doesn't fall forward. This will be good. Okay. Let's do a little tilt. I plug the phone into its charger while it films, so that kind of pulls it a little bit. See if anybody has there we go. Oh, we got Miss Sue L in the chat. Hey Miss Sue, how are you? We're gonna start painting and introductions and everything in about 2 minutes, but how are you doing? It's so funny, everything with watercolor I have situated and set up so that I could immediately start painting, and setting a time to start painting, it definitely feels weird. Hello, Miss Margaret. How are you? Miss Margaret recently messaged me. She had donated some of my paintings to a charity auction, or an auction for her friend for medical purposes, which is really awesome. So hopefully that will bring in some money for her friend. Yep, this is starting soon. It's going to start in about a minute. Just set up a studio for the first time after 5 years of painting at the kitchen table. That is awesome. I rent a 2-bedroom house, and one of the rooms, the bedrooms, is just dedicated completely to different art. I have some different art desks in here that people have given me, like a writing desk and whatnot. and right now it's just crowded with materials, and hopefully eventually I could buy a house, and then from there, probably a 3 bedroom house and have one room for art or a storage space, and then another one for the darkroom printing, etc. But fast and loose watercolors is a great way to get out of a slump, and we'll dive into it. And I'm glad to hear you all are doing good. So, welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. This is a live filming. In front of me, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. It is 140-pound cold press. I tore it from a large sheet, and I've been just coating it with water as we've been waiting to get started. And it is thoroughly saturated. Now, I am down in Louisiana where it's quite humid, and the temperature in the house right now, it's pretty cold. I have it pretty low, so it's probably at 65. And for me, my water doesn't evaporate quickly. For some people in different parts of the country, their paper has a hard time staying saturated, or different areas of the world. Some people have misters. Joe Menza has been playing with water bottles and having color in his water bottles. Other people take plexiglass and wet both sides of their paper. Today, we're going to utilize the raw sienna, the burnt umber, and the raw umber using Da Vinci brand and Cotman brand. I find that they're pretty good price-wise and easy to go to. And with kind of the fast and loose tonalist painting, it's very easy to go through a lot of pigment, and using the cheaper tubes, the more student grade, even though they're fantastic and professionals use them, it just makes things easier. Yeah. So people in the dry areas, I know that when people in England and Europe, whenever they start hitting the summer months, they have difficulty with their watercolors. Beyond the plexiglass and wetting both sides and a mister, I'm really not sure what other solutions there are for it. If I was to go outside and paint, this paper would have been dried by now. Even though it's been raining every day, it would dry really quick. So let's start off with some raw sienna. I don't have a composition in mind, so we're just gonna kind of play wet and wet. This is the Tonalist fast and loose style that I've adopted from some of the modern contemporary oil painters. Dennis Sheehan, Stuart Davies. They'll take their pigments, they'll thin them out, their oil paints, and they'll paint onto a smooth surface. They'll paint heavily in, and they'll wipe back and forth. Mind of Watercolor has a technique similar, where he'll thoroughly coat his paper with water and let it just occur, and then dry it out, and then from there create an image from it. So definitely not like an inventor of this technique or anything like that, but those are some other painters that currently utilize it. A lot of the fast and loose painters will, I think, do less water initially. I'm painting flat, so they will often paint vertically and deliberately get runs to take place. Those are people like Joe Menza, David Usher, Stephen Cronin, Lois Davidson. Hey, how's it going, Zolan? I have some friends from a tea Discord, and they dropped by and said hello. So I hope you'll enjoy this. I was telling them earlier today that I used to live stream on Twitch, and people would hop in and out and chat and have fun. That kind of fell to the wayside, and now I'm just trying it out again with YouTube. I'm going to grab some burnt umber. Now once again, this is going to be an imaginary scene, and we're just building it up. It's a great way to relax and to let loose. This is our burnt umber on top, and to explore tonal values. With a paper towel, you can lift up and you pull the moisture out of it, creating dry spots. And you can take the hake and just go right back into it. So play around with that, just the back and forth, see what type of effects you can get. Be wary of repetitive stamping effects, so it just has a more natural feel to it. And you'll get splattering, and you'll get the dots in other areas. Some people will have some issues with that. It's just a matter of preference. And if you don't like where it's going, you can just pick the paper towel and just start lift things out. And if you guys have any questions, let me know in the chat. Eventually, I'd like to find a speed where people could follow along if they'd like to. Now's the time to actually give my spiel. If you ever want to follow along with any of these, obviously feel free. And at the end, I encourage you to sign your own name to it. And you have my express permission to sell anything you do whenever you follow along with one of my paintings or tutorials or experiments. I want you guys to be successful, to have fun, and to have money for art supplies. Art supplies are expensive, and that will help out. Plus, if you have friends and family, I'm sure they would love a painting from you. Usually those are our first customers. Whether they truly like it or not, who knows? But it's fantastic when people support you in that regard. And then they get to watch you blossom and grow. Okay, which weight paper works best for this? So this is a 140-pound cold press. I avoid 300-pound paper due to the price. A sheet of this weight with cotton is probably $4 to $6, the large sheet, while the 300-pound paper I think is like $9 to $12 potentially. So a little bit out of my price range for that. That being said, I think focusing on having cotton paper is the better way to go, as long as you have cotton with it. Some people will paint fast and loose and wet on top of the 90-pound paper, and I haven't explored that much. I have some 90-pound drawing paper, but I don't start super soaking it. I am wetting the paper a lot more than other people do. Stephen Cronin, Ron Ranson, David Usher have used the 25% cotton paper or the 75% cotton paper with great results. And I remember a few years ago when a lot of us were starting out with the fast and loose, Lois Davidson accidentally bought some hot press and I think in the 90-pound range. And at first was a little uncertain about it, but she wound up enjoying it. So I know that's not a straight answer, but I prefer the 140-pound because of the price and everything along those lines. Now, let's see. I have the medium hake brush. I'm going to play around with my rigger at this point, and I'll go back and forth. And with the rigger, painting wet and wet, you're going to put your lines in and it's going to diffuse and soften up. And this is just to create that soft atmospheric effect that eventually, when we dry it off, we'll paint on top. When working wet and wet, I find that going with more pigment will prevent back runs and cauliflowering. For example, I'm going to grab some straight water from the container and put it in, and you'll see how it starts cauliflowering right there. Personally, I don't enjoy that effect, but some people do. And you can use that if you want. You could also pull the moisture off of it with no pigment and pull up. I think in Chinese brush painting that's known as thirsty brush. So just to kind of reiterate, more pigment when you're going wet and wet if you're trying to put your color in, more water or just pure water on the brush if you want to create the cauliflower effect, a dry brush into the wet and wet if you want to lift, and that's a thirsty brush effect from the Chinese brush painting. Now usually I'll go at a faster rate with this, but I'm trying to take things slow so that I have time for y'all to ask questions and for me to kind of address those. And you get to a point where you start to subconsciously make marks and do things. So if there's anything that I'm doing that I'm not describing, please let me know if you want me to go into detail with it. One of the painters that I greatly admire, Stuart Davies, I mentioned him earlier. He always talks about how easy oil painting is and landscape painting. And I agree with him. And a lot of people say that he makes it look deceptively easy because he's just been doing it for so long. And I can agree with that as well. The binder clips, I'm on a board that I must have bought 4 or 5 years ago. You just go to Hobby Lobby, or it's not Hobby Lobby, Lowe's or Stein's or any one of those type of places, and get some pieces cut. Use your binder clips just to press and stretch it out. Notice I didn't tape the edges. Whenever you are like super saturated on taped paper, it'll start buckling in the middle and you won't be able to stretch it out, or at least I haven't found a way to do that. The wetting the paper on both sides technique is something that some people do for keeping it flat. There's also people that use frog tape for taping their paper down. I haven't tried that. So for those of you just joining in, we decided on a 3-color palette: raw sienna, burnt sienna, raw sienna, burnt umber, and raw umber. And we're just painting wet and wet, creating an atmospheric tonalist landscape painting. With this one, I don't usually use raw sienna with this two color combo. I mainly will just go burnt umber and then my raw umber, and I'll utilize the raw umber as a shadow. But we'll play around. Here I'm making my horizontal strokes. I'm imagining this as a stream or water, and horizontal strokes to represent that two-dimensional plane going back into the paper is very common amongst artists. First person I recall articulating that is Eric Kopel. He is a modern day Hudson River Valley painter and very prolific, and I recommend checking him out. He studied the Hudson River Valley painters in immense depth and just is such a beautiful painter. He has some a tutorial video or two. I think it's put out through a different company. The tutorial video, I will say, is on the very pricey side. But around the holidays, they were putting parts of it out for free on Facebook and YouTube for people to check out. And that's where I'd seen that. Now, I'm just going in with the rigger, building up this growth. I'm avoiding using the blow dryer. You could paint wet and wet to a dry completion, essentially, if you would like. We might wind up doing that in this video. So far we've just used the hake, the rigger, and the paper towel. I do have the card ready in my hand for some scraping. It's a little side effect. I'm getting a little symmetrical right here, so I'm trying to break this down a little bit, lower to my picture plane. The rigger gets its name from it being used to paint the rigging on sails and ships, but you can do a lot more marks than just a straight line. I like to use it a lot on the side for that different texture. I've seen that in the Chinese brush painting. They call that the axe stroke if you're going over dried areas. I've seen David Usher apply a lot in that fashion. I mentioned the horizontal strokes for water. If you watch Bob Ross with oils, he'll come down for trees like this, or he'll take his big brush and come down. And then he'll do a horizontal stroke to create that plane. So play around with that. Let's see. I'm going to bring my dark forward into this corner. I personally just have a preference for darkening my corners and creating a framed effect. Does anybody have any questions in the comments? In the comment section. We'll grab some burnt umber. Burnt umber itself is a fantastic single pigment. Me and Joe and Matthew Clemens were talking about that in the live or the chat that we did. And a lot of painters will recommend that as a single pigment study. This is just an imaginary scene, just letting it grow. When creating the imaginary scenes, I have a few rules that I go by, or a few things that I keep in mind. As I move forward in the picture plane, I'll get darker tonally. And I'll put more detail as I get closer in the picture plane. But in the real world, you'll see objects that are darker in the midground than they are in the foreground. And I've seen that with Thomas Girton paintings when I was studying some of his. He is a British watercolor painter, early 1800s, contemporary and I think friend or frenemy, I think it was friend of J.M.W. Turner. And I believe Turner was quoted as saying, if Girton didn't die at such a young age, Turner would have been out of a job. So the White House at Chelsea is one thing that I looked at from him. I think I have that up on YouTube, just sketching from it. And there's a whole bunch of stuff above Bolton in different regions. You listened while washing the floor? Yeah, I never listened to podcasts and audiobooks, etc. But like I started doing that about a year ago, or like in the dark room, I'd play an audiobook of H.P. Lovecraft. And at the beginning of the summer, I started listening to a podcast called The Nine Club, which is a group of skateboarders, and they interview either current or historically famous skateboarders or people working within the scene. And it's just so interesting. And that's what made me want to do the live chats with Matthew Clemens and Joe Menza. I'd eventually like to start interviewing watercolor painters or other artists. Let's grab some raw sienna in this mix. I'm painting a little directionless at the moment. But I think now might be a good time to demonstrate some scraping. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you for watching, too. With scraping, there's a few different edges you can work with. You have your sharp edge, you can have a round edge, and you can have a wide flat edge. The sharp edge is going to do the most damage to the paper, and it's usually going to create a backfill. So if you're looking for dark lines, scraping with that hard cut edge is the way to go. But painting wet and wet, when things dry off, everything else around it will lighten, but those dark lines will usually stay. So they don't dry the same tonal shift as the paint around it. So you want to be careful with the sharp edges and maybe save them to when the paper's just damp. The round edge will push pigment out the way if you want to pull out your lights and highlights. The flat edge can be used for rocks and different textures. Stephen Cronin, I think Menza was saying that Stephen Cronin might have been the first person to demonstrate that flat edge as rocks on YouTube. I would like to start, like I said, interviewing different people and see where they got that from, and kind of just start creating a lineage of these techniques. Somebody from the chat, an MJ from Australia, came into watercolors in their 70s. Appreciate the tutorials. Watercolor is a wonderful, surprising medium. That's awesome. It's so, I never thought that I would like be doing videos on YouTube and people would want to watch them, and it really means a lot. So I'm really excited about that. That's helping people out, and it's such a great medium to get into because you could just set up and just start going at it. You could come home from work. I think Miss Sue earlier said that she had set up a little studio in the kitchen. You can come home and relatively get things going fast, unlike oil paints. And then the cleanup is relatively quick as well. I'm using the flat edge to gently create some rocks and mounds. I'm sure Bob Ross used his palette knife as well. There was Zoltan Szabo. If you're ever looking for art books, he had a lot of videos, a lot of books on watercolor experiments and techniques. I'm not sure if he would scrape things out in the wide fashion, but he would use a palette knife within his watercolors. One thing with palette knife from Zoltan Szabo is that the palette knife will come with manufacturer's oils on it. Same thing like a dip pen nib. And that's why dip pens don't work great right off the bat, because they have the manufacturer's oils. Within dip pens, people will take the nib and stick it into a potato for a few minutes, and that would remove the oils, or brush it with a toothbrush and toothpaste, using the grit to get that off. Zoltan Szabo would use a lemon or lemon juice, I believe. So if you plan on using a palette knife for applying paint or maybe scraping, that might be a way to go. Yeah. And being that this is like the first watercolor official live stream, I'm excited to see you all chatting in the live chat. So feel free to chat in the live chat and get to know each other. It is interesting that people are finding watercolor in their later years. Oh, well, thank you so much, Mr. Frank. I actually have known Frank for quite some time. He is quite the gentleman. And thank you, Miss Margaret. With just, you know, the slow application or using the paper towel to just going right back, you can create that variation. And don't be afraid just to take a spot and just do that. I had no plan to do that, but treat everything as an experiment and as a learning possibility. I think I've talked in the videos about a oil painting professor that I had where Mr. Chris Semerjeff, he would come up and scrape your oil painting right off and draw right on it. And you would have been painting so slow and just worrying about it so much, and he would come along and do that. But it was just a great lesson in realizing that a lot of it is just practice and learning. And that if you don't take those risks, you're not going to learn. Now, the framers, Frank had sent me a picture of some of the framed paintings, and they were very interesting. The framers had left the deckled edge around the outside. I'm curious for those of you in the chat, with watercolor and displaying it, do you prefer being able to see that deckled edge, or do you prefer having the matte cover over it? I've had other people have it framed in that fashion where that happened. So, Mr. Jeff, so you're saying the most difficult thing for you is to slow down. Well, I'm glad that the videos have been helping. What do you mean by like slowing down? I'm not quite sure what you mean. And Miss Sue, I do not cover my palette with saran wrap. I will just leave it out like this and let it dry. And you could either squirt it with a spray bottle. Some of the British masters, I remember reading James Fletcher Watson. He would go out on site, and being cold in Britain, he would have a bristle brush, an oil painting brush with hot water, and use it to scrub the pan and get everything loose. But no, I don't cover it in any way. There is a wet palette on the market. I want to say it's like $30. And I haven't tried it, but other people have. It might be a Jack Richardson brand. Yeah, that's a good trick. If you feel like you're painting too fast or a video is too fast, you can switch the speed on YouTube to a slower rate. Okay, so you cover your, so Miss Margaret covers hers with a mat. Some people will take a damp sponge and I think put that with their palette and cover it, and that will help retain the moisture. One time I took my whole palette and stuck it in the bathtub, ran water over it, and just let it sit. And that's how I just cleaned my palette back to start. I think that there is potential for mildew or growth along those lines if you keep your palette damp all the time. The best place to look for questions about that, if you plan on keeping it wet, there's a forum wet canvas And I can look up and see if anybody has discussed that. There's some Facebook groups, watercolor tips and techniques. There might be people on there that have used the keep their palette wet. Yeah, there's no need to finish things quickly. One thing that I found whenever I'd play with this technique with oil paints is that I'd be done within 15 minutes, and then I would have this canvas taking up space in the room. So with oil paints, I started taking my time and taking a different approach where I would paint on panels, let it dry for a few days, glaze on top, and just go back and forth. This palette of 3 colors would probably benefit from maybe a phthalo blue if you wanted to mix it in for super darks. Payne's gray would be nice on this. I'm kind of pulling my sides a little bit here. What tea are you drinking? I had the 2022 Cookie Monster this morning, and then during LP's tea drop. We haven't used the blow dryer at all. So you can paint all the way to completion, like I said earlier, with no dry offs at all. You'll hit a point where you won't suffer too much from a tonal shift when it dries off. And the tonal shift is essentially due to having the water in your paint and just it's kind of like wet cement. You walk outside and the cement is dark, but then when it dries up it lightens up. Same thing with blacktop and clay and stone and everything. You'll see where we had scraped, and now we can go in and just create the darker trees, and that creates variety and depth. You can simply go on the side if you need to ground them. You don't want your trees to look like they're just floating there. You can just add texture. You can take the hake and add foliage. The number 4 is nice if you want to just grab a whole bunch of paint and put in a bigger tree. I like to kind of shake it along so that it's not just one line. Let it dance. You get those calligraphy type effects. this guy. So I'm using my raw umber in this palette as my dark. If I was to oil paint, I'd use the raw umber as just a background color, mainly for still lives. But I haven't oil painted in so long. I've got to get some of that on here. I think I want a mass in here, darker tone. Before I started this video, I made thermos tea, thermos shoe for work tomorrow. I got to go, and I'm going to go with the planetary shark feed. I don't think I've ever had that tea in a thermos before, so we'll see how that goes. Just trying to break up this mass. It feels very very similar tonally, so I'm putting some darker trees in front. Let's bring one up high. This would be a nice area to play around with a fan brush, if that's what you're into, as an easy way to apply. I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is learning your materials that you're using. I think the most important thing is the paper, and for me it's 100% cotton. Then from there, light fast pigments and paints, things that'll last hopefully just our lifetime at least. Then from there, learning how to use the tools that you have. Yeah, so a Shang Puer, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a tea that whenever they collect the leaves, and it's from Yunnan, and hopefully that's the correct pronunciation, province in China, the Yunnan region. They collect it, and it's barely processed. It's kind of, to make it very simple, I think it's kind of put in a wok, but gently kilgreened, but not completely kilgreened. So there's still some enzymes and everything living within it. And then it's stored for years. And he said 05, so that's, you know, like 17 years old. And as it's stored, it'll slowly age, and just naturally age. Was that an okay description, Zolam? We drink it almost every day, so. I'm just using the side of the brush to create these pine tree effects. gonna try two things now. The first thing is to take the blow dryer, and I'm gonna hit the paper with the blow dryer for a moment. I'm gonna leave the audio on, and I want you guys to let me know in the chat if it was overwhelming or not. Okay, so here's the warning, just to prepare you if you have headphones or anything in. I'm going to use this blow dryer. Okay, I didn't completely dry it off. I just wanted to get an idea of how it sounded in the live. I'm now going to mute it for me. And then I unmuted it. So I did it with the blow dryer so you guys can hear the blow dryer, and I did it without. Was the blow dryer overwhelming, or just go ahead and just mute in the future? Let me know what you all think. And you'll see that we had a slight shift tonally, but these three pigments, don't have too much of an issue with that. I deliberately painted for a longer time than usual before doing the dry off. I might have to get a new one of these soon. It's starting to act all funky. It's been 4 years. Yeah. Some people prefer the blow dryer, some people don't. With extreme wet and wet, if you were to hit it with the blow dryer, it doesn't seem to dry as naturally as if it was to just sit there. And in fact, the blow dryer can push the pigments around. If you were to go super wet and use the blow dryer, usually the lighter setting and holding it way high up during the initial blow dryer stages will help prevent some of that pushing, and then from there go to a higher setting. But leaving a blow dryer out of your tool set, that is completely fine. I'm just playing around on top. This is kind of just the finishing touches. If there's anything that I haven't touched upon, let me know. Miss Suzanne, thank you so much. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So you've been painting for 3 years? Yeah. I don't think I would talk when using the blow dryer. I would have to just say, hey guys, I'm going to mute and blow dry and do some a way to signal it so that you guys don't hurt your ears. I referenced James Fletcher Watson earlier, and he's another painter that's no longer with us, and he has a lot of books out there. And I remember reading him going into his car, he said, and using the heater to dry off his painting. But he was in UK and England, and I can't imagine how cold it must get there. I think that some people even mix rubbing alcohol into their paints and their palettes to kind of prevent that drying out from happening. There's one brand of fountain pen inks, Noodlers, that has a brand. Some of their paints, he calls them polar, where if you leave your fountain pen in the car and it freezes outside, your ink won't freeze. So apparently that's a common issue for y'all up north and in the UK. Oh, no, that's a fantastic question. I'll get to Ali in a second. Okay, wet and wet. Does it refer to painting on already pre-wet paper? Sorry for the super basic question. No, that's a fantastic question, and it's super important that you guys ask things like that. I saturate my paper and I paint into that, and that's wet and wet. It's going to diffuse. I can also take a spot, and I'll do it to show you. So right now it's dry, more or less right here. I can wet that spot. I'm just using a quill brush to show this. And now I can take pigment and feed that in, and that's wet and wet as well. So you can use it for a variety of effects. I use it to start a painting off and to soften things and to create an underlying softness. Others will use it as a textured effect locally at later stages in a painting. Hopefully that answered the question and the few uses that you can have. Now that I have the quill out, I'm just going to do a little side swipes and get a little dry brush texture. We have, is that Miss Allie? How old were you when you started painting? Did you teach yourself or learn in school? I love all your videos. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. As a little kid, my grandmother, I would do little art projects with her, and they'd be making little Christmas ornaments and stuff like that. I don't remember drawing too much as a kid, unless it was maybe drawing a dragon, or I do remember making a little polar bear for an art class. I started doing art in, let's say 2007, while I was in college, maybe 2006. My friends had some pastel sticks, and then very quickly I went out and bought some tubes of oil paint and just started kind of teaching myself how to oil paint. At the time, I was getting my degree in mathematics and physics, and it was kind of really just helping out mentally and with anxiety and stress. I then just started taking some art classes at college while I was getting my math and physics degree. So that was in the 2000s. Then I moved down to Louisiana, and while I was getting my teaching certification, I teach math and physics, high school, I had still taken art classes, and then I eventually kind of lost my muse, because down here the art was different than up in New York, where I think it was more impressionist and traditional up in New York, what I was learning, while the people around me in Louisiana at the college were doing more expressive abstract stuff. So it just, things didn't flow right for me. Then I started teaching, which took up a lot of time, and the free time was spent fishing, just going out. And about 5 or 6 years ago, my special ed inclusion teacher, she had told me about watercolor pencils and had me try them. And then very quickly I went out and bought stuff for Chinese watercolor painting. Spent a year doing Chinese watercolor painting. Then I moved over to Western watercolors for the first time, 2018. and started teaching myself through books by Zoltan Szabo, James Fletcher Watson, Ron Ranson, videos by David Usher, Stephen Cronin, Alan Owen, Rick S. I have a hard time pronouncing his last name, but if you just type in Rick Watercolor, you'll see him. So that's kind of my history with that. Just in high school, I did darkroom photography. In college, I did some of that. And then just last year, I realized that I could set up my own darkroom in the house that I rent and started doing that. And about 2 weeks ago, you probably noticed I started posting a lot of block printing stuff, so I taught myself how to do the block printing. And I've been playing with that. Let's put some birds in. For me, just a simple swoosh works. Down here in Louisiana, you'll often see a few birds circling around, especially over the cane fields. But depending on the region that you're in, you can kind of get an idea for how your birds look in the sky. Just the swoop shapes work. I think it was Lois Davidson who was really progressing with birds for a while in some of her examples. Who else? I don't know. I always try to mention all the other painters that I've interacted with and learned from or talked to, just because I don't really want it to be gatekeeping or anything like that, meaning that I'm hiding information from y'all. Because, I don't know, I think painting has done so much for me, and it seems like for all of you, it's done a lot. And just think about the techniques and stuff that were lost to history. I mean, granted, their livelihoods were at stake for being a painter, that they had to hide their techniques essentially, or conserve it, preserve it. But things were lost to history because of that. You can use your fingers. I scraped with the card earlier, but you can use your fingernails. I'm going to mute to do a dry off. All right, so while I was doing the dry off, you might have seen me take my back of my hand to feel the paper. If it feels cool, it means that it's still damp. I'm going to sign this one and consider it done. Anybody have any questions or any comments? I enjoyed watching beautiful painting. Look forward to the next live. Good night, Miss Margaret. Thank you so much for dropping by and for watching. I had put a poll on YouTube. In the YouTube community, it lets me do a little poll, and people said Sundays is what they preferred. So whenever I have, I don't know if I'll be able to do it every Sunday or other days during the week, but I'll do a post in advance and say, hey, this is when I plan on doing one. And then I'll start it a little bit earlier, like I did this time. I started at 5:40ish, sorry, 4:40ish, just to do the setup and to get everybody time to get into the video. But I think the live went really well. I'm really excited about it. Seeing you all come in and ask questions and you all chat and interact is fantastic. Thank you, Miss Sue. I'm excited to see what you all paint. And thank you, Miss Susan. If you all paint anything, feel free to tag me in it. I would love to see what you all do. Before I sign off, I'll give about another minute if anybody has any questions, comments, and then from there I'll sign off. Let's see. A little mat over it. I probably tilt the angle of the screen so y'all can see. Oh, I put a cat bed in here so that the cats wouldn't be all over me during this video. And they're both like curled up together in the cat bed. Oh, now they got up. The mats that I use, I get them from Amazon. I bought them in bulk. I think this was a set of 10 or 25 where I buy the front, the back, and a bag, and I believe it's acid free. That is probably about $70 for this large size with the 11 by 14 opening. There is a website that I started using, Matboard HQ. If that's not the right one, I'll actually let me pull that up and I'll put a link for you all to see. Matboard HQ. I'm gonna post in the chat. Okay, so that website, Matboard HQ, they have a, let's see, Art Pros presentation kit. That's the second option on there. It has the front, the back, and the bag. You can choose your size cut on the inside, and you can choose the size and the color. And I started ordering from them in bulk for the mats for my darkroom photography and my smaller size stuff. And I found that they were really great price-wise. The inside for this one, you'd say it'd be an opening for 11 by 14 painting, but it's about 10 5/8 by 13 5/8. So this outside paper, 11 by 15, inside mat, 10 5/8 by 13 5/8. But that Matboard website is where I started buying in bulk for smaller sizes. I might eventually start buying in bulk from them for larger sizes. Did this tilt? Yeah. I hope did that answer the mat question? I would not, if you're looking to mat stuff let's say you're looking to do a farmer's market or start selling or just to give away things as gifts, I would buy mats in bulk than individual mats, for monetary reasons. At least that's what I have to do. Because if I was to buy a single mat, it would just be too much. Okay. If you have any more questions down the line, if you have anything that pops up, feel free to message me and let me know. All right. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your evening, and I'll be back soon. Thank you. Bye.